Welcome to another Zeteo Zoom Town Hall. I see lots of you are joining. We appreciate you taking time out on a busy Monday. We're talking about a big topic today, the US-Iran crisis following the US attack on Iran less than 2 weeks ago, Saturday before last, and of course the ongoing Israel threats against Iran. We've got an excellent guest to take some of your questions today. I'm joined by Seyed Mousavian, who is a former Iranian diplomat. He served as Iran's ambassador to Germany, head of the Foreign Relations Committee of Iran's National Security Council, and he was spokesman for Iran's nuclear negotiations team, I think about 20 years ago, but he can correct me on that. Currently, Seyed Mousavian is a visiting research collaborator with Princeton University here in the United States. He joins us now. Seyed Mousavian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mehdi. Good to be with
So
you.
we're just going to jump right into it as people keep joining the chat. And by the way, guys, ask your questions in the Q&A. I'll try and ask as many of them as I can to Seyed Mousavian in the limited time that we have, but please stick your questions in there while we chat. I've got some questions of my own, as you can imagine, the big one being, what is the state of Iran's nuclear program right now? Because Donald Trump says it was mission success, the facilities were obliterated, the program's been set back for years and years. Peter Hegseth, the defense secretary, has said something similar, and yet America's own intelligence community, the Defense Intelligence Agency, for example, says actually no, there wasn't that much damage done to Fordo and other facilities, and the IAEA says a lot of that enriched uranium got out. So what is the current status, in your view, of the Iran nuclear program?
See, Mehdi, if the objective was to damage the Iranian nuclear facility, buildings, utilities, even centrifuges, I think there has been a heavy damage, a big damage. The extent of the damages, practically nobody knows.
Yeah.
But we can agree the damage has been heavy. However, if the objective was to dismantle Iranian nuclear capability, I believe they would never be able, because you cannot kill know-how technology. Iranians, they have already mastered technology. You may destroy some buildings or some centrifuges. They would be able to rebuild it again.
So I've heard this argument before, and it is a good argument, because once you have the nuclear know-how, it doesn't matter how many buildings you blow up, how much uranium you prevent. But the Israelis would argue, actually, we can get rid of the nuclear know-how. We're killing your scientists. They've killed, I believe, a dozen scientists in the last few weeks, in their homes, in their apartments, in work facilities. Isn't that a problem for Iran?
Israelis, they have killed Iranian scientists since 2010. But look at the Iranian nuclear program. More scientists they have killed, more sanctions the US have imposed. Iranians, they have been able to increase the capacity and the level of their nuclear program. I mean, when they started to kill Iranian nuclear scientists in 2010, Iran had just one generation of centrifuges called IR-1. Now, after 40, 50 nuclear scientists have been killed during the last 15 years, Iran has IR-2, IR-4, IR-6, IR-8, IR-9, a very sophisticated generation of centrifuges. Therefore, we can say they have never been able to kill the know-how or the Iranian science capability by killing the nuclear scientists.
So in terms of the current state of the program, there is reporting that something like, I think it's 400 kilograms, is it, of the enriched uranium was removed from Fordo and Isfahan and other places before the attacks took place. Even US intelligence says cars were seen leaving. This stuff doesn't require much space. I believe it was the trunks, the boots of 10 cars could fit all the uranium. That uranium, of course, according to the IAEA, had been enriched at 60%. And the IAEA, of course, warned prior to the attack by the US, and we'll talk about the attack in a moment. But just on the nuclear program, that 60% enriched uranium, as the IAEA and many other people have pointed out since, as you well know, that cannot be used really for much else other than a step on the way to a nuclear weapon. You don't need 60% enriched uranium for pretty much anything. I believe there's some narrow medical research it could be used for, but most people would look at that and say, Iran doesn't need 60% enriched uranium. The only reason Iran had 60% enriched uranium is because you want to be a threshold nuclear state. You want to be able to go for weapons at short notice. Surely that's undeniable. Liking this video? And don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Mehdi, assuming that this argument is correct, but let's go back a little bit to verify what was the real Iranian intention. Iran accepted the nuclear deal in 2015.
Yep. The JCPOA.
Based on the nuclear deal, Iran accepted to enrich below 5%, which is civilian enrichment. Iran accepted to give up thousands kilograms of its enriched uranium, exported or diluted. Iran really didn't have any stockpile of 20%, any stockpile of enriched uranium 60%, enriching below 5%. Iran had the highest level of cooperation with the IAEA. If the technical questions of the IAEA was removed, IAEA formally, officially announced all ambiguities, all questions are removed. Everything was working well. But President Trump in 2018 withdrew from the deal when Iran was in full compliance. And worse,
agreed.
When Iran was committed and in compliance with the highest level of transparency and verification, and with the most comprehensive limits on its nuclear program, which no other member of NPT has ever accepted, the US imposed the most comprehensive sanctions. Iranians, they started to decrease their commitments on their JCPOA and to increase the level and capacity of their nuclear program in order to show to the US they are not going to capitulate. And I believe they increased the level of enrichment as a bargaining chip. They just wanted to bring the US, to push the US, to put pressure on the US to come to the deal. And my reason is exactly, Mehdi, during the first 3 rounds of nuclear talks between Arakchi and Steve Witkoff, Arakchi told Steve Witkoff, we are ready to go back to below 5%. We are ready to export all 60% enriched uranium. Therefore, they
Arakchi, of course. Arakchi, of course, being the Iranian foreign minister and Steve Witkoff being Donald Trump's negotiator. So that's an interesting argument that it was done to, bait the Trump back to the table to say, look, we've got the 60%, we'll bring it back down. Of course, the hawks would argue the other way around, that it was 60% to get to 90%, 90% is a weapon. Either way, let's take your argument. Let's say that's true and that was the bargaining position, the negotiating. Surely you would accept now, with the benefit of hindsight, that backfired. That 60% was used as casus belli by Israel and the United States after the IAEA said Iran was in breach of its obligations. They used the 60% number as a justification of saying, we've got to act now. The threat is imminent. Iran is months away from a bomb, as we've heard Netanyahu saying for 30 years. But this time they were able to point to 60%. It wasn't the 3.67% under the JCPOA. So you would acknowledge now that if that was the strategy, it backfired.
I don't believe so, because when you look at Netanyahu's statement, you remember, Mehdi, first time in 1996, he came to the US Congress and he said, ladies and gentlemen, Iranian nuclear program is so sophisticated. Iran is going to have nuclear bomb in 1 or 2 years. This is existential threat. It was 30 years ago when Iran did not have enrichment at all. Iran did not have 1 centrifuges at all. And since 30 years, every year, he has repeated Iran would have nuclear bomb in 1 or 2 years.
No, I'm agreeing with you on Netanyahu, but I'm saying the 60% gave him an excuse, right? By going to 60%, that backfired on you.
The 60% practically was a good bargaining chip, because when Steve Witkoff sat with Arakchi, they agreed on 4 major principles: on transparency measures, on exporting the 60%, on lowering the Iranian enrichment level to below 5%. They agreed on everything. The moment they agreed, Prime Minister Netanyahu called President Trump and asked him to stop it. And President Trump immediately changed the US position from peaceful enrichment below 5% to dismantling all Iranian.
Yes. The zero enrichment demand, which is unrealistic. Exactly. Where were you Saturday before last when the bombs dropped? Were you surprised to see the US when you heard America had bombed Iran? Were you surprised, or did you expect it?
Actually, I was on my way to China. It was about 24 hours from the US to China in different planes, airports. When I landed in Guangzhou in China, my host told me, he was saying, do you know Iran has been attacked? I was shocked because I was the whole time in the plane. I didn't know.
Did you expect it? Did you think Trump would attack Iran?
No, actually, I really didn't expect it because I was trying to be optimistic that Trump is really after diplomacy. He is going to make history. He is going to change Iran-US relations. He has the power. He has the majority of Congress. Iranian side is ready. The Iranian president has said he's ready to open the country for the US investment. The Iranian nuclear negotiators has accepted every transparency measures, everything. They were in good situation with Steve Witkoff, but I really could not expect first Israel would attack Iran and then the US would join, because from 2003, when we started the nuclear negotiation with Europe, you have Mehdi over 100 IAEA reports or statements, even the last one, saying there is no evidence of diversion in Iranian nuclear program toward weaponization. You have every United States security establishment, their assessment since 2007, saying there is no decision, no evidence of Iranian diversion to nuclear program diverting toward weaponization. When every US assessment, I mean the intelligence assessment, every IAEA is insisting there is no evidence, why the US should attack Iran? Israel, yes, Israel is different, I mean.
Yes, well, let's park Israel, let's talk about the US. A lot of analysts in the US who are critical of the Trump strike, they've actually pointed out that if Iran wasn't going for a nuclear weapon before, it definitely will now. This has accelerated the Iranian nuclear program in the same way that Israel's attack on Osirak in Iraq in 1981 accelerated a covert nuclear weapons program by Saddam Hussein. I interviewed Trita Parsi, who I'm sure you know, for Zateo, the night of the attacks. And he said to me that day, on the Saturday, he said, I think Iran now will have a nuclear weapon within 5 years. This is going to definitely lead to Iran getting nukes. Is that your view now, that this attack has actually incentivized the Iranian leadership to go for a nuke, even if they weren't before?
I think President Trump still have a chance. If President Trump would come for a balanced and fair deal based on international rules and regulations within the framework of NPT, respecting the rights of Iran under Non-Proliferation Treaty, and accepting, I think, the peaceful civilian enrichment, like other members of NPT, like Germany, like Japan, like Brazil, like Argentina, like other members of NPT, and would not discriminate Iran, I think Iranians are not going to go to nuclear weapon. However, if Iran is going to experience what they have already experienced during the last 23 years. Look, Mehdi, they have accepted to continue with NPT. They have accepted the highest level of transparency measures no other member of NPT has ever accepted. Yes. Nevertheless, more cooperation they have had, more sanctions, more pressures, and now bombing Iran. Then Iranians are telling us, what is the use of NPT for us? NPT is an instrument for putting sanctions, pressures.
So you think they would pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty like North Korea and go for a nuke if this continues, the hostilities?
If the US continues, I think this would be a lesson from Americans to Iranians. Go ahead. make nuclear bomb, because the other countries made nuclear bomb, we never attacked them, like Pakistan, like India, like North Korea. Every country with nuclear bomb has never been threatened to be
Yep.
attacked. But
Unfortunately,
Iran,
that's the
I
lesson,
mean,
unfortunately.
this is what Americans are giving a lesson.
So let me ask you this. How worried are you about escalation? You said if it continues. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government have both threatened the life of the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, who is not just a political leader, but a religious leader in Iran, as you know better than me. The Iranians haven't taken so well to those threats, unsurprisingly. I see that Ayatollah Nasser Makarim Shirazi, one of Iran's top Shia Ayatollahs, has put out a statement saying that Netanyahu and Trump are the enemies of God. How worried are you about the implications? Because we haven't seen Khamenei. I think he's in hiding. He's in a bunker. He's somewhere. How worried are you about what happens to negotiations if he were to be killed by Israel or the US?
If there would be a real negotiations, the US should not go after assassination or helping Israelis to assassinate. If the US is going to continue the same policy of sanctions, pressures, terrorizing, killing, assassinating, and threatening Iran, I think everybody should be worried about escalation of the current crisis to the regional crisis. I think it's going to happen if the US is going to continue the same path.
So before I go, we've got a lot of questions in the Q&A from our subscribers who are watching, and thank you for being Zateo subscribers. One last question for me that I've been meaning to ask for a while. Even people who in the West who are sympathizers with Iran, supporters of Iran, don't like the American-Israeli policy in Iran, they get very frustrated when they see the death to America, death to Israel chants that are then weaponized by people in the West. I don't know, you're based in the US. You must have seen Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham and John Bolton and all the hawks going on American television, members of Congress, members of the administration. When they're asked, is Iran a threat to America? They always say, well, they chant death to America to us. You, as someone who's been identified as being on the more moderate, reformist wing of Iranian politics, you must find that frustrating, that you're in the middle of a nuclear negotiation with the US. Is it helpful to have Iranian officials, Iranian crowds, Iranian government saying death to America? Aren't you just giving a talking point to the hawks in the West?
Mehdi, I personally, since the early years of revolution, I never supported such slogans, rhetorics, either death to America or death to other countries or burning the flags of any country. Nevertheless, this is really mutual wording and threats has been used. Americans always, they have used the same language. Rogue state, the most, the terrorist state. And recently you saw President Trump unconditional surrender. And he said Iran is the most dangerous country in the world. I mean, they are using the same language against each other. And they should stop both. It should stop both by both.
Okay, let's take some questions from our subscribers who have been asking a lot of questions. So let's just take here. So, good question from an anonymous subscriber. Does Iran have enough drones, ICBMs still left to go after Israel and penetrate Israel's iron dome? We haven't really talked about the war between Israel and Iran. Were you surprised? I feel like both countries, correct me if I'm wrong, turned out to be a little bit of paper tigers, right? Israel actually showed that despite all the money that the US gives Israel, Iran has been able to inflict damage on Israel and Israeli cities. And vice versa, we were told for years that Iran was not Iraq. It was a much harder country to attack. It had all these proxies. Turns out Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas were not there to protect Iran, and Iran's air defenses were taken out pretty quickly by the US. What do you make of the military situation right now between Iran and Israel?
First of all, I think it is now clear for everyone, that the Israeli main objective was to destroy Iranian nuclear program, to destroy Iranian missile capability and facilities, to bring a regime change Iran, to convert Iran to a failed state like Syria and Libya. I mean, this was really a master plan designed many years ago. It was not just about some month ago. It was planned for many years ago. Second, I am completely convinced this plan was coordinated with the US and all NATO members.
Okay.
And NATO members and the US, they were already informed, they were in full cooperation and fully supported Israel to go ahead. I mean, Israel was the face, but practically it was NATO. Now, whether they have been able to destroy all Iranian nuclear program facility capability, I believe they have failed. They have damaged, heavy damages, but totally destroyed, I don't believe so. Number two, they have been able to destroy Iranian missile capability. I believe they have damaged, but the number and the effectiveness of Iranian missile attacking Israel shows how powerful, how precise, and how destructive was those missiles. Number two. Number three, they were thinking if when they attack Iran, Iranian nation, because they are not happy with the government, they would uprise and they would demonstrate and they would bring regime change within the country. But we saw completely vice versa. The Iranian nation become completely
Yes.
united to defend the country. But I would say Israel damaged Iran hugely. And in return, Iran also damaged Israel hugely. But there is one difference.
Okay.
Iran was alone. Israel was supported by over 30 NATO countries. It was not really Israel, it was NATO. I mean, and then the first 3-4 days, Israel had upper hand. From the day 5 or 4, Iran started to have upper hand. That's
Okay.
why Netanyahu asked President Trump,
Yeah.
please come to stop this war, because they knew they cannot continue. I think the master plan of Israel failed, and Iran on this issue resisted more than everybody was expecting.
That's true. I should point out, by the way, just an earlier discussion, Anand Atre, one of our subscribers, says, point of information, Israeli lunatics chant death to Arabs. The difference, Israel acts with impunity on those chants. Fair point, Anand. Mariam Molson says, the media, I have no faith in mainstream media. The media reports that there's been unrest and retaliation executions by the Iranian government. Is that even true? I don't know what to believe or not to believe. There are reports, aren't there, Seyed Mousavian, of a crackdown now. Obviously, Iran suffered a massive intelligence breach. There's no way Israel could have killed so many generals and so many scientists without having sources inside of Israel, spies inside of Israel's. What is going on right now in terms of the crackdown, the post-attack fallout?
The level and the depth of infiltration was really shocking. I mean, this was really shocking to everybody. But we can understand this intelligence infiltration was the result of many years of cooperation between Israeli intelligence service and all NATO services for many, many years. It was not just one country. They collected all this intelligence for 10, 15, 20 years. Finally, they arranged a master plan to bring a regime collapse. And they were thinking this will happen in first 2-3 days when they kill 20, 30 high-level generals and many nuclear scientists. And so that's why, I mean, Iranians, they were shocked. Yes, after this attack, now they have started to arrest many, many people suspicious. It is normal. I mean, when a country is infiltrated so deeply and wide, and then
what about the argument? What about the argument that the Economist magazine has made? Sorry, finish your point.
Yeah, then they go to go after the network. And of course, some innocent people, they may have been arrested, but this is normal.
So I don't know if you saw the big piece in The Economist magazine, which pointed out, or they reported, that right now, post these attacks, you said it, the country has rallied around, but also the military and the intelligence services and the IRGC has actually consolidated power in the wake of these attacks. With the absence of Khamenei, who hasn't been seen, is in a bunker somewhere, there is this argument, and with the top level generals having been killed, The Economist was arguing that a lot of these more younger, hot-headed, more reactionary types are coming through to A, replace those dead generals, but also B, take more control of Iranian society. Is that your reading of the situation? It's been a tilt to the military?
Yes, it is, because the country has been attacked. This is the first time, Mehdi, two nuclear states have attacked a non-nuclear state, which its nuclear program was under the IAEA safeguard. This was a clear violation of UN Charter. It was a clear violation of IAEA rules and regulations. And now Iranians, they see their country have been attacked. United Nations Security Council was not able to issue one simple condemnation statement. The IAEA failed to support.
But I understand that. I'm asking about the concept.
That's why now everybody is supporting the army, whether IRGC or army, to defend their country.
But separate to defending the country, long term or medium term, does this push Iran in a more, quote unquote, to use the language of Western media, hardline direction, a more anti-Western direction, a more militaristic direction? You, as someone who's been identified as on the more reformist end of the political spectrum, I'm assuming you don't want to see Iran go in that direction.
It is not important whether I want to see or not. Definitely I don't want, it's clear. My position is different with Iranian government position. Everybody has read my op-eds. For many years, I'm calling for the necessity of ceasefire between Iran and Israel, for better relation between Iran and the US. I mean, it is not important what I think, but the reality, Mehdi, is about your question. I believe it depends to the US. If the US is going to continue the same policy of coercion, pressure, attacking, threatening, I think the Iranians would become more radical. And of course, the military establishments, they have to have more control over the country. But if the US would change, Iranian domestic political arena also would change.
Oz, you mentioned relations with Israel. Oz Haq, one of our subscribers, asked in the chat, after 1979, the new Iranian government called for the destruction of Israel. This has been a potent tool for hawks in Israel and the US to label Iran as an unhinged, evil country that wants to destroy Israel and must be punished. What was the historical context for this? Is it still relevant? If it's not relevant anymore, how do you prove that? Israel and the neocons have used it to justify any number of assassinations and bombing raids. We talked about death to America. That slogan comes with the corollary of death to Israel. You mentioned a moment ago you've been calling for better relations. Can there be better relations between this Israeli government and this Iranian government, especially with what's happening in Gaza?
Before that, there should be a type of rapprochement between Iran and the US, because Israel cannot attack, cannot threaten Iran without the US. And this attack could not have happened because in the absence of US green light and support. Therefore, before Iran and Israel, I believe if there can be a serious, authentic negotiations, first to resolve the nuclear, second to go for other disputed issues, a comprehensive negotiation between Iran and the US, I believe one of the issues could be that Iran and Israel, they stop their mutual threatening and existential threat.
Joseph Ali asks, was the unilateral proclamation by Trump of a ceasefire between, calling an end to the Israel-Iran war, what he called the 12-day war, was that an indication that Israel was begging him to do that or not?
It was published in American media. I mean, the Emir of Qatar, the foreign minister of Qatar, they all said they were contacted by Netanyahu By President Trump. And President Trump also himself said that he was contacted by Netanyahu. It is publicly published and open now that it was Netanyahu who asked President Trump to mediate to stop the war, because it was clear, because Israelis, the plan was just 2-3 days, assuming everything would collapse. But when it took 10 to 12 days, with such a huge destruction in Israeli cities, of course Netanyahu could not continue. Of course he had to come to President Trump, please stop it.
Mohammed Rajab, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing his name, apologies. He says, do you think, he asks, that Iranians will now abandon the policy of empowering Shia militias in the Arab neighborhoods of the world that alienated the Arab Sunni world? Obviously, over the years, you know, Seyed Mousavian, especially Iran's role in Syria in particular, but also Iraq, has alienated a lot of people who might be your allies at a time like this. What do you make of that argument?
Look at the Hezbollah issue. I mean, Iran has left the decision about the role of Hezbollah to Hezbollah and the Lebanese government to decide. It is not new. This is for many, many years. Hezbollah always have coordinated and decided its grand strategy. And recently they accepted the ceasefire because the Lebanon government asked. Nevertheless, since there is a better relation between Iran and Arab countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Emirate, I believe this escalation about the Iranian ally group in the region would decrease as long as and as much as we have a better relation between Arab states and Iran.
And Joyce Al-Sofi asks, you mentioned rapprochement with the US. Would that include no longer supporting the Palestinians? Because that's been a big block between US, Iran, Israel relations, that Iran still stands with Palestinians in a way that a lot of other Muslim majority countries do not.
No, Iran, I believe, would continue to support Palestinians. But there should be, I think at the end, there should be one change.
What about Hamas? That's often used against you, right? You're a state. The other argument you hear, as you well know, you live in the US, you hear on American TVs, Iran is not just saying death to America, but it's supporting terrorism. It's a sponsor of Hamas and Hezbollah. Where does the relation between Iran and Hamas go in the future?
Before Hamas, we should go to United Nations Security Council resolutions. Since 78 years, we have about 400 UN resolutions asking for two-state solutions. If the Israelis, they have accepted two-state solutions, we would never have such a crisis in Gaza. It is Israelis, they have violated every United Nations Security Council resolution. It is Israelis which are opposing, and they have opposed for decades for two-state solutions. I mean, everybody now is claiming Hamas or Iran, but the reality is that Israel has opposed two-state solution adopted by hundreds of United Nations Security Council for 70, 80 years. And this is the source of the crisis. The source of Palestinian crisis is about Israeli denial of two-state solution and the right of Palestinians to have independence.
But the Iranian government is not in support of two-state solution. I thought they're in support of a referendum where people would pick. Maybe I'm misremembering.
They are not in support of two-state solution. Nevertheless, many times, even at the level of supreme leader, publicly they have said, whatever Palestinians they accept,
yes, that's the statement I've seen. Susan Scott asks, an AP article yesterday described the long lead up, 15 to 20 years, to the bunker buster bombs being dropped on Fordo. They say the US designed and tested this bomb specifically for Fordo, has been planning this attack for years, looking for an opportunity to use the bunker busters. That makes me think, she says, there will be more attacks, regardless of negotiations, unless there is a regime change. What do you make of that view?
I really don't know, but I said before, if the US is going to support the policies which they have been imposing, specifically during President Trump, the first term, maximum pressure, the second term, war strategy, I think Americans, they may continue to use such a bombs, but the consequences would be out of the control. I think Iranians, they were patient in retaliation. attacking American base in Qatar. In advance, they informed the US, they
Yeah.
informed Qataris that get your people out because they didn't want Americans to be killed. But if America is going to attack again, do you think
That could
Iranians
change.
they would inform the US that they are going to attack? I don't believe
It's a
so.
good point. Mehdi Esmidi in our chat, one of our subscribers, asks about any leverage that may have been provided by Saudi Arabia's announcement that they would defend Iran when Israel was attacking Iran. Of course, when Israel first attacked Iran, the Saudis did come out and condemn that. But then, of course, Iran attacked Qatar, and Saudis also condemned that. What is the relationship right now between between Iran and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
The relation between Iran and Saudi Arabia now is in a much, much better situation compared to some years ago. They have in constant contact, consultation. But there is a big fear now in Islamic world because you remember in 2000, General Commander of NATO, General Clark, said White House has a plan to attack 7 countries. You remember the last one?
I do.
All those 7 countries, Libya, Syria, all of them, they have been attacked. Now they attack Iran. Therefore, there is a big fear in the region that Israelis, they have a master plan of greater Israel to dominate the whole Middle East, and they will come after Egypt or Turkey or Saudi Arabia if they can defeat Iran. Therefore, nobody now wants Iran to be defeated because they would be the next.
Just to go back to an earlier point, Leon Gunther asks, wouldn't it be helpful if the Iranian government were to declare that it doesn't have a goal to destroy Israel as a country? Why is this issue not mentioned in your discussion? I think we did mention it, Leon. Correct me if I'm wrong, Seyed Mousavian, your position is that all countries should desist from existential threats from one another in the Middle East.
It should be also mutual. Israelis also, they have been threatening Iran. I mean, practically, Israel has done more existential threat to Iran rather than Iran. This war was not Iranian war. It was Israeli war. Iran does not have nuclear bomb. Israel has at least 100 nuclear bombs. Israel has not accepted to be member of NPT. Israel does not allow IAEA for inspection. Israel has violated every ceasefire. Israel has violated hundreds of United Nations Security Council resolutions. That's why Iranians also, they have the same concern. If there is a deal between Iran and the US, to my understanding, there should be a phrase that Iran and Israel would respect the UN Charter, not threatening the existence of each other. And better, there should be an initiative by United Nations Security Council to have a non-aggression pact in the Middle East. Because Israel is attacking.
And a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, which one UN resolution once said, which requires Israel to give up its nukes, which it won't. Sarah, we're running out of time. Couple of last questions. Sorry, we've not been able to take more questions. We've taken a dozen or so. Sarah Ahmed says, given the Iranian president's recent remarks, as reported by Press TV, the Iranian broadcaster, criticizing the IAEA for alleged double standards and questioning its credibility as a watchdog, how does Iran foresee the future of its relationship with the agency? You were a negotiator once. You dealt with the IAEA. Mr. Grossi right now, Iranians are very upset with him. They think he gave the green light for this attack when he said that, Iran was in breach and the IAEA board voted that Iran was in breach of its nuclear obligations for the first time. That gave a bit of a green light to Israel and then the US. Going forward, can Iran work with the IAEA? Do you think they're going to pull out of the NPT?
I think Grossi destroyed Iran-IAEA relation and trust completely. That's why about a week ago, I tweeted and I suggested for Grossi to resign in order to facilitate IAEA-Iran relations. But why Iranians now are extremely pessimistic about Grossi, even they think he is the agent of Israelis and the US, they think Grossi is complicit in the crimes, the war crimes against Iran. Why they are? Because in his report leading to the recent IAEA resolution, he mentioned the breaches or violation of NPT by Iran. You mentioned. But nobody knows those issues which Gerussi referred to was issues which were resolved already by the IAEA in December 2015. It was inspected, it was verified, and it was closed. Grossi opened the file of 2-3 issues, which was already investigated.
It was backward looking, yes, I remember.
And all the issues, Mehdi, is related to 20, 30 years ago.
Yes, that's 100% true, and I made that point when I was on Piers Morgan's show. Let's end this discussion by asking about the Iranian people, who even before the Israeli and American attacks were living under pretty draconian Western sanctions. They were living under a pretty repressive political system at home. Aubrey Harris asks, has this attack by the US and by Israel, has that been a setback for human rights in Iran? And just to go with that question, just a parallel question from Elena Malnati, another Zeteo subscriber, says, what will be the main consequences or changes from this war for ordinary Iranian citizens? If you could handle both of those before we finish.
To be fair, Hassan, Mehdi, I believe a majority of Iranians are not satisfied with the establishment because of the economic situation. The most important for Iranian nation is the economic situation. But now, when they see their country has been under attack, their sovereignty, their independence is attacked, I think now they are united. This is a great moment for the Iranian establishment, Iranian government to have a complete change in its relation with the people and try to keep the people satisfied. I think this is a moment for Iran to change, because the Iranian people now, they are united to defend the army, to defend even the leader, to defend the government, because now they are staying against the US and Israel to defend Iran.
This is a moment for Iran to change. Let's end this discussion on that note. Let's see what happens next. Seyed Mousavian, visiting scholar at Princeton, former Iranian ambassador, former nuclear negotiator. Thank you so much for your time, for your answers, for taking questions from our subscribers. Zeteo folks watching at home, thank you for joining this town hall. Thank you for being paid subscribers, allowing us to do discussions like this. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family to sign up, subscribe to Zeteo, support independent journalism so we can have more discussions like this that you don't see on cable news. Thank you all for watching. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.